What would you do if the most beautiful creature in the galaxy crashed into your backyard, bleeding and desperate, speaking words that would change everything you thought you knew about humanity's place in the universe? Marcus Chin thought his biggest problem was paying rent on his struggling auto repair shop. He had no idea that in 60 seconds, he would become the guardian of the last surviving member of an ancient alien race, and discover that humans possess a power so terrifying that entire civilizations have spent millennia trying to destroy us before we could awaken to our true potential. This is the story of how one man's kindness toward a dying stranger ignited a war that would either see humanity ascend to become the galaxy's protectors or witness our complete annihilation. The choice would be his to make. But first, she had to trust him with the truth that would shatter everything he believed about being human. The wrench slipped from Marcus Chin's oil-stained fingers as the night sky exploded in streaks of green and silver. He had been working late in his garage, trying to coax life back into Mrs. Rodriguez's ancient Honda, when what looked like a meteor shower turned into something far more terrifying. The lights moved with purpose, weaving and diving like hunters chasing prey through the darkness above his small town of Cedar Falls. Marcus stepped out of his garage, wiping his hands on a rag as he watched the celestial dance. 28 years of fixing engines had taught him to recognize patterns, and these lights followed rules that had nothing to do with physics as he understood it. They pulsed in coordination, communicated through bursts of color, and moved with an intelligence that made his skin crawl. Then, one of them fell. Not the graceful descent of a shooting star, but the chaotic tumble of something dying. It carved a burning scar across the sky before disappearing behind the tree line that bordered his property. The impact shook the ground beneath his feet and rattled every tool on his workbench. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and emergency kit from his truck. Growing up in rural Montana had taught him that when something crashed in your backyard, you went to help. It was as simple as that. He pushed through the dense woods, following the scent of ozone and burning metal until he found the crater. The ship was beautiful and terrible. Its hull curved like liquid mercury frozen in motion, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Steam rose from its surface as it cooled, and through a jagged tear in its side, Marcus could see soft, pulsing light that reminded him of a heartbeat. That's when he heard her crying. The sound was purely human in its grief and pain, but it carried harmonics that made his chest ache with empathy he couldn't explain. Marcus approached carefully, his flashlight beam dancing across twisted metal until it found her. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and clearly not human. Her skin held the pale luminescence of moonlight on water, and her hair flowed like liquid starlight. Her eyes, wide with pain and terror, contained depths that suggested intelligence beyond anything he had encountered. She was tall and graceful even while injured, her limbs proportioned in ways that spoke of evolution under different stars. Blood that glowed faintly blue seeped from wounds across her arms and torso. When their eyes met, she spoke in a voice like wind chimes. The words were incomprehensible, but her desperation was universal. She tried to sit up and gasped, pressing a hand to her side where her blood painted her clothing darker. Marcus held up his hands, hoping she would understand the peaceful gesture. "It's okay," he said softly. "I want to help." Her beautiful features crumpled with what looked like relief, and she reached toward him with a trembling hand. The moment their skin touched, the world exploded into shared consciousness. Images flooded his mind. Vast fleets of crystalline ships burning in the void. Cities floating among the clouds of gas giants, their spires reaching toward distant suns. Her people, the Kythera, dying by the billions as something dark and hungry swept across their worlds. And, beneath it all, a truth that made Marcus's knees buckle with its implications. They were searching for humans, had been searching for thousands of years. Her name was Lyralii, and she was a guardian of the ancient order that had protected the galaxy for eons beyond counting. Her people had fought the void swarm across 100 systems, buying time for younger races to grow and evolve. But the swarm was winning, consuming everything in its path, turning entire star systems into feeding grounds for their incomprehensible hunger. The Kithira were losing because they lacked something the Void Swarm feared above all else. Something only humans possessed. As the mental connection faded, leaving Marcus reeling, Lyralii collapsed into his arms. Her breathing was shallow, her luminescent skin growing dim. She whispered something in her musical language, and somehow he understood. "Please," she had said, "help me reach them. Help me find the humans before it's too late." Marcus lifted her carefully, surprised at how light she felt despite her height. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he could feel her life ebbing away with each step back toward his garage. Whatever the Void Swarm was, whatever cosmic horror had destroyed her civilization, it would have to wait. Right now, a woman was dying in his arms, and Marcus Chun had never let anyone die on his watch. He laid her on the cot in his office and began examining her wounds with the methodical approach he used on broken engines. The blue blood was already beginning to clot, but she had lost too much. He needed medical supplies beyond his first aid kit, but the nearest hospital was 40 miles away, and something told him that conventional medicine wouldn't help her. Lyralii's eyes fluttered open as he cleaned the worst of her wounds. She reached up and touched his face with fingers that felt like cool silk. When she spoke, her words bypassed his ears entirely, appearing directly in his mind. "You are not what we expected," she whispered across the mental link. "Your people are supposed to be warriors, conquerors. The ancient records speak of humans as apex predators who would reshape the galaxy through force." Marcus paused in his ministrations. "Maybe your records are wrong. Perhaps." Her mental voice carried a note of wonder. "But if they are, then we may have found something even more powerful than we dared hope." She tried to sit up again, and Marcus gently pressed her back down. "You need to rest. Those wounds need time to heal." "There is no time," she said aloud, her accent making the English words sound like music. "They followed me here. The Void Swarm has my ship's signature, and they will come to ensure no word of what they've done reaches the younger races." As if summoned by her words, the lights returned to the sky outside Marcus's garage. But these weren't the graceful craft that had pursued Lyralii. These moved with the mechanical precision of locusts, blocking out stars as they descended. Marcus could feel wrongness radiating from them, a psychic pressure that made his teeth ache. Lyralii struggled to her feet, swaying dangerously. "You have to run," she said urgently. "They cannot know that humans exist. Not yet. Not until your people are ready." But Marcus Chun had spent his entire life fixing broken things, and he was not about to abandon the most important repair job of his career. He helped her to a chair and began gathering supplies from his emergency kit. "I'm not leaving you here to die," he said simply. "And I'm definitely not running from something that wants to hurt innocent people." Lyralii stared at him with those impossibly deep eyes. "You would stay, knowing what they are? Knowing that they have destroyed civilizations that spanned thousands of worlds?" Marcus checked the charge on his grandfather's hunting rifle, a modified weapon that could punch through engine blocks. It probably wouldn't do much against alien technology, but it made him feel better. "My grandfather taught me that a man protects what matters, no matter the odds." "Your grandfather was a warrior?" The creatures that poured through Marcus's destroyed garage door defied every natural law he understood. They moved like oil given predatory purpose, shifting between shapes that suggested spiders, wolves, and things that had no earthly comparison. Their bodies absorbed light, creating patches of absolute darkness that hurt to perceive directly. When they moved, reality seemed to flinch away from them. Marcus pulled the trigger. The modified hunting rifle's report was deafening in the enclosed space. The first creature exploded backward, spraying ichor that hissed and steamed where it hit concrete. The others paused, their attention focusing on him with an intensity that made his vision blur at the edges. "Impossible," Lyralii breathed behind him. "Your weapon should not have affected them. They exist partially outside normal space." Marcus worked the bolt action and fired again, catching another creature's center mass as it tried to flow around a workbench. Everything bleeds when you hit it hard enough in the right place. But even as he spoke, the wounded creatures were pulling themselves back together, their forms restabilizing like liquid finding its level. The rifle had hurt them, but it wouldn't be enough. Marcus counted at least a dozen of the things, and more were flowing through the shattered doorway. That's when something awakened in his mind. It started as a whisper, a voice that spoke in harmonics he felt rather than heard. Knowledge bloomed across his consciousness like fire spreading through dry grass. He suddenly understood what Lyralii had tried to tell him, what the ancient records had spoken of, what made humans so terrifying to species that had mastered technology beyond imagination. Humans were the galaxy's immune system. Every other intelligent race had evolved on stable worlds, in predictable environments where survival meant finding your niche and perfecting it. They had become specialists, masters of specific aspects of existence. The Kythera had achieved perfect harmony with energy and matter. The Zephyrians had transcended physical form to become beings of pure thought. The crystalline collective had merged their consciousness into a vast, shared intelligence. But humans had evolved on a world that actively tried to kill them. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, massive die-offs followed by explosive evolutionary radiations. Earth was chaos incarnate, and its children had learned to adapt to anything. Where other species found their perfect solution and stopped growing, humans had become the universe's ultimate generalists. They were the one race that could not be predicted, categorized, or contained. And the void swarm, which existed to consume and perfect everything it touched, could not digest chaos. Marcus felt this knowledge settle into his bones as the creatures regrouped for another attack. But now he could see them differently, not as incomprehensible aliens, but as highly specialized parasites. They were perfect at what they did, which meant they were vulnerable to anything unexpected. Lyralii, he said calmly, reloading the rifle. Can you access your ship's systems from here? Some of them, she replied, her mental voice tight with pain and confusion. But, Marcus, what you just did should not have been possible. No projectile weapon can harm the swarm's manifestations. That's because nobody ever shot them with one before, Marcus said. He was moving now with a confidence that surprised him, gathering items from his workshop with the efficiency of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done. They're so used to energy weapons and exotic physics that they never developed defenses against simple kinetic force. He grabbed a container of motor oil and began splashing it across the floor between them and the creatures. The void swarm entities seemed to sense the trap and hesitated, their forms rippling with uncertainty. Can you create an electrical discharge through your ship's power systems? He asked. Lyralii's eyes widened with understanding. You want to ignite the accelerant. But the thermal expansion will be minimal compared to what they've faced from plasma weapons. Not trying to burn them, Marcus said, pulling out a compressed air tank from his pneumatic tools. Fire's just the delivery system. He opened the valve on the tank and began filling the garage with pressurized air. The creatures sensed the change and began advancing, their forms becoming more aggressive, more solid. Marcus waited until they were committed to their approach before striking a match and dropping it into the oil. The explosion was spectacular, but brief. What followed was far more devastating. The rapidly expanding gases created a pressure wave that hit the creatures like a physical blow, but, more importantly, it disrupted their connection to the dimensional space they partially occupied. For a moment, they were forced to exist entirely in normal reality. Marcus used that moment to empty his rifle into the closest cluster of creatures. Without their extra-dimensional armor, they died like anything else made of flesh and nightmare. The surviving creatures retreated to the doorway, their forms flickering with what might have been confusion or rage. Through the mental link, Marcus could feel Lyralii's amazement. They're afraid, she whispered. I can sense it through their psychic resonance. They don't understand what just happened. Good, Marcus said, reloading again. Fear makes everything stupid, even cosmic horrors. But their victory was short-lived. The creatures outside began to coalesce into a larger form, drawing mass and malevolence from the ship that had brought them. The new entity was the size of a small building, and its presence made the air itself feel thick and wrong. A harvester, Lyralii said, her mental voice tight with terror. Marcus, we have to run. A single harvester destroyed the defense fleet of my homeworld. Through the shattered garage door, Marcus could see the creature taking shape. It was like watching cancer become architecture, all wrong angles and surfaces that folded in on themselves. Just looking at it made his eyes water and his stomach churn. But instead of fear, Marcus felt something else rising in his chest. Anger. Pure, human rage at something that thought it could come to his world and hurt people under his protection. The Void Swarm had killed billions of innocents across the galaxy, and now it wanted to add Earth to its list of conquered worlds. Not on his watch. Lyralii, he said, his voice deadly calm. Does that thing need to maintain coherent form to exist in our reality? Yes, but, Marcus, its structure is held together by forces that means it has stress points, he interrupted. Everything with a structure can be broken if you know where to hit it. He was already moving, gathering tools from his workshop with the methodical precision he usually reserved for rebuilding transmissions. Heavy wrenches, industrial adhesive, and the acetylene torch he used for the most stubborn repairs. You cannot be serious, Lyralii protested as understanding dawned across their link. That creature has withstood bombardment from weapons that can crack moons. But nobody ever attacked it with a cutting torch and a really bad attitude, Marcus replied, strapping the equipment to his back. Besides, I've got something those other weapons didn't have. What? Marcus checked his rifle one more time and headed for the door. I'm pissed off. The harvester had finished taking shape by the time he stepped outside. It loomed over his property like a mountain made of hunger, its surface crawling with smaller entities that might have been sensory organs or weapons or something worse. When it noticed him, a sound like breaking reality echoed across the landscape. Marcus walked steadily toward it, ignoring the psychic pressure that tried to drive him to his knees. The creature's attention focused on him with crushing intensity, and he felt his mind being probed by something vast and alien and utterly without mercy. But human minds, forged in the chaos of Earth's history, were not easily broken. Where other species had developed mental defenses, humans had evolved mental flexibility. Marcus didn't try to resist the probe. Instead, he let it in, then showed it exactly what it meant to corner a human who had nothing left to lose. The harvester actually recoiled, its form wavering as it encountered the pure, undiluted stubbornness that had carried humanity from caves to stars. It had never faced a mind that could stare into the abyss and respond with, "Yeah, so what?" Marcus used its moment of confusion to get close enough to matter. He ignited the acetylene torch and began cutting into the creature's base structure, looking for the stress points his engineers could detect even in something so alien. The harvester screamed and tried to swat him away, but its attacks were designed for massive targets. Not a single human who moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent his life working in tight spaces. Each cut released energy that made the air shimmer with heat, but Marcus kept working, following the flow of forces through the creature's impossible anatomy. He was rewriting the rules of engagement, forcing a specialized predator to fight on terms it had never encountered. Behind him, he felt Lyralii channeling power from her damaged ship, not to attack, but to shield him from the worst of the harvester's attempts at retaliation. Together, they were becoming something new. Human chaos and Kythera precision, working in harmony. The harvester's death was spectacular. When Marcus found A3 days after the harvester's destruction, Marcus's quiet life in Cedar Falls became the epicenter of first contact with a dozen alien civilizations. Ships of impossible design filled the sky above Montana, their crews representing species that had traveled from across the galaxy to witness something unprecedented. A human who had killed a Void Swarm entity in single combat. Marcus sat on the tailgate of his truck, sharing coffee with Lyralii while watching diplomatic vessels attempt to land in his wheat field. Her wounds had healed with remarkable speed, leaving only faint silver lines across her luminescent skin that she claimed were marks of honor among her people. The coffee, she had declared after her first tentative sip, was aggressively wonderful in ways that Kythera taste receptors had never experienced. The blue ship belongs to the hegemony of thought, she explained, pointing to a crystalline vessel that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. They're what your people would call a democracy, if democracy involved sharing consciousness among trillion-member populations. A sleek, silver craft descended near the barn, its hull flowing like mercury. The Zephyrian ascendancy. They evolved beyond physical form eons ago, but maintain these vessels for interacting with material beings. They're probably terrified and fascinated by you in equal measure. Marcus took another sip of coffee and watched a ship that looked like a miniature star settle gently beside his workshop. Let me guess. Each one of them has a different idea about what to do with humanity. The hegemony wants to study you, Lyralii confirmed. They believe human chaos could be harnessed as a weapon against the swarm, but they'll want to understand and control it first. The Zephyrians see you as a cosmic anomaly that threatens the ordered universe they've spent millennia perfecting. The Solar Confederation, she nodded toward the starship, thinks humanity should be elevated to full galactic citizenship and given advanced technology immediately. And what do you think? Lyralii was quiet for a long moment, her deep eyes reflecting the morning light. I think, she said finally, that asking what to do with humanity is the wrong question entirely. You're not a problem to be solved or a resource to be managed. You're people. The question is what humanity wants to do with the galaxy. A new ship appeared in the sky, this one moving with predatory grace that made Marcus's instincts prickle. It was dark, angular, and radiated menace even at a distance. Several of the other vessels immediately began climbing to higher altitudes. Korthak Empire, Lyralii said grimly. They're the reason the galactic accords include provisions for planetary quarantine. When they uplift a species, what remains is usually a shadow of what came before. They don't sound like the diplomatic type. They're not. The Korthak believe that strength is the only virtue that matters, and they've spent centuries conquering lesser races to prove their superiority. They see humanity's defeat of the Harvester as a challenge to their status. The Korthak ship landed with deliberate force, scarring Marcus's field with its retro thrusters. When the boarding ramp descended, the beings that emerged looked like they had been designed by someone who thought predators weren't scary enough. Tall, armored, with faces that combined the worst features of wolves and raptors, they moved with the confident stride of apex predators. Their leader, a massive specimen covered in scars that probably had stories behind them, approached Marcus with what might have been curiosity or hunger. When he spoke, his voice was a rumble that felt like distant thunder. You are the human who destroyed a swarm manifestation, he said in accented but clear English. I am Warprime Thax of the Korthak Third Fleet. I have come to test your worth. Marcus set down his coffee cup and stood up slowly. At 6 feet tall, he was still dwarfed by the alien warrior, but something in his posture made Thax pause. It was the bearing of someone who had faced impossible odds and won. Test how? Marcus asked calmly. Combat, Thax replied, showing teeth that belonged on something designed for eating other large predators. If you are truly the apex your victory suggests, you will prove it against a Korthak warrior. If you survive, your species will be granted the protection of our empire. If you fall, your people will submit to our guidance in preparing for the greater war. Around them, representatives from the other ships were emerging, creating a roughly circular gathering in Marcus's yard. Beings of crystal and light, entities that existed as probability clouds occasionally coalescing into visible form, creatures that looked like living architectural blueprints. All of them were focused on this moment with an intensity that made the air itself feel charged. And if I refuse? Marcus asked. Thax's laugh was like breaking stone. Then, you prove that human victory was mere chance, unworthy of galactic attention. Your world will be marked for swarm consumption, and we will find worthier allies elsewhere. Lyralii's hand found Marcus's arm, her mental voice urgent in his mind. You don't have to do this. There are other ways to prove human potential. But Marcus was already nodding to Thax. All right, but I get to choose the weapons and battlefield. The Korthak Warprime's eyes lit up with predatory interest. Acceptable. Choose your doom. Human. Marcus looked around his property, taking inventory. The burned-out garage, the scarred field, the various ships landed among his farming equipment. An idea began to form, one that made him smile in a way that would have worried anyone who knew him well. No weapons, he said. Hand-to-hand combat. Winner is whoever's still standing at the end. Thax's laugh became genuinely delighted. You would face a Korthak warrior unarmed? Your courage borders on madness. Maybe, Marcus admitted. But there's one more condition. We fight in my workshop. The alien delegations murmured among themselves as they gathered around the damaged building. Marcus had spent the last 3 days clearing wreckage and rebuilding, but the space was still cramped, filled with tools, equipment, and the accumulated debris of a lifetime spent fixing things. Thax examined the battlefield with professional interest. Confined space, limited mobility, obstacles that could be used as weapons. He nodded approvingly. You seek to negate my size and reach advantage. Clever. I seek to fight on my home ground, Marcus corrected. They squared off among the workbenches and tool cabinets while alien dignitaries watched from the doorway. Thax moved first, launching himself forward with speed that should have been impossible for something his size. His clawed hands swept toward Marcus's throat in a killing stroke that had ended hundreds of duels. Marcus wasn't there to meet it. He had spent 30 years moving through the cramped spaces of engine compartments, learning to navigate around obstacles while carrying heavy parts and dangerous tools. Where Thax saw barriers that limited movement, Marcus saw familiar terrain that he could use to his advantage. He slipped under the alien's attack and drove his elbow into Thax's ribs, targeting a gap in the natural armor plating. The Korthak grunted but barely staggered, spinning to backhand Marcus with enough force to crack concrete. Marcus caught the blow on a wrench he had palmed from a nearby bench, using the tool's leverage to redirect the strike into a support beam. The impact left a dent in the steel, but Thax's hand was now trapped for a crucial second. That second was enough for Marcus to grab a pneumatic impact wrench from its charging station. The tool whined to life as he applied it to Thax's elbow joint, where the alien's natural armor was thinnest. The high-frequency vibrations found resonance in the Korthak's bone structure, causing pain that transcended species. Thax roared and tore free, but his left arm now hung at an awkward angle. He had underestimated human resourcefulness, assuming the workshop was just an obstacle course instead of a carefully organized arsenal. You fight without honor, he snarled, switching to a more defensive stance. I fight to win, Marcus replied, circling around a workbench that put him near his welding equipment. Honor doesn't keep people alive. The Korthak charged again, this time ready for human unpredictability. He swept aside tool cabinets and crashed through workbenches, accepting minor cuts and bruises to close the distance. His good hand fastened around Marcus's throat with crushing force. But Marcus had been planning for this moment. As Thax lifted him off his feet, Marcus triggered the acetylene torch he had concealed behind his back. The flame burst to life inches from the alien's face, causing him to flinch and loosen his grip. Marcus used that loosened grip to twist free and drive his knee into Thax's solar plexus. The alien doubled over, and Marcus brought both hands down on the back of his neck in a hammer blow that sent the Korthak crashing to his knees. For a moment, silence filled the workshop. Then, Thax began to laugh, a sound like boulders tumbling down a mountainside. Magnificent, he said, struggling back to his feet. Blood trickled from cuts where debris had found gaps in his armor, and his injured arm hung useless at his side. You fight like a Korthak, using everything at your disposal without shame or hesitation. Is that supposed to be a compliment? The highest compliment my people know, Thax replied seriously. You have proven that humans are worthy of respect. The Empire withdraws its claim on your species. He turned to address the gathered aliens, his voice carrying clearly in the Montana morning. Let it be recorded that humanity has demonstrated the warrior's virtues. They are chaos given form and purpose, and any who face them in honorable combat do so at their own peril. As the various delegations began departing, their missions completed or fundamentally altered, Lyralii approached Marcus with something that might have been pride in her luminous eyes. What you did here will be remembered across the galaxy, she said softly. You've just changed humanity's place in the cosmic order. Marcus looked around his workshop, taking inventory of the 2 weeks after first contact. Marcus Chin's auto repair shop had become the unofficial embassy of Earth. Government officials arrived daily in black vehicles, scientists set up monitoring equipment in his cornfield, and reporters from around the world camped outside his property line. Through it all, Marcus continued working on Mrs. Rodriguez's Honda, because some things were more important than cosmic politics. Lyralii had become his unofficial liaison with the various alien delegations that continued arriving. Her ship, repaired with a combination of Kythera technology and human engineering, now sat in his barn like the galaxy's most expensive conversation piece. She had adapted to Earth customs with remarkable speed, though she still couldn't understand why humans insisted on adding sugar to coffee when its natural bitterness was so perfectly balanced. The Solar Confederation has submitted a formal request to establish a trade embassy, she reported, settling into the lawn chair he had set up beside his workbench. They're particularly interested in human music, apparently. Marcus paused in his work on a transmission rebuild. Music? They've never encountered organized sound that deliberately induces emotional responses in listeners, Lyralii explained. Their own artistic expressions are primarily mathematical in nature. One of their cultural analysts described Mozart's Requiem as weaponized beauty. What about the others? The hegemony of thought wants to offer selected humans the chance to join their collective consciousness temporarily, to study how individual chaos affects group dynamics. The Zephyrians are proposing a cultural exchange program, though they're still terrified that human unpredictability might somehow infect their perfect order. Marcus nodded absently, his attention focused on a particularly stubborn bearing that had seized in the transmission housing. Sometimes the best approach to a stuck component was patience and steady pressure rather than brute force. And the Korthak? Lyralii's expression became more serious. Thax has requested permission to establish a warrior's lodge on Earth. He wants to study human combat techniques and train selected Korthak warriors in what he calls chaos fighting. His superiors are either fascinated or horrified by the concept. The bearing finally yielded to Marcus's gentle persuasion, sliding free without damaging the housing. He held it up to the light, examining the wear patterns that told the story of how this machine had lived its mechanical life. "What do you think I should do?" he asked. "About the diplomatic offers?" "About all of it." Marcus set down his tools and really looked at her. 3 weeks ago, I was just a guy who fixed cars in a small Montana town. Now I'm apparently humanity's introduction to galactic civilization. I never asked for this responsibility. Lyralii was quiet for a long moment, her deep eyes reflecting the afternoon sunlight streaming through the barn door. "Do you know what the ancient Kythera word for guardian means? I'm guessing it's not just person who protects things. It translates roughly to one who fixes what is broken," she said softly. "My people believe that the universe tends toward entropy, and that guardians exist to maintain the balance between order and chaos. We thought that meant preserving existing structures, maintaining the status quo." Marcus picked up another component from the transmission, this one a synchronizer ring that had worn down from years of smooth operation. "And now I think we misunderstood our own purpose," Lyralii admitted. "The galaxy wasn't broken because of chaos. It was broken because everything had become too ordered, too specialized, too perfect. When the void swarm appeared, none of us knew how to adapt because we had forgotten how to change." She gestured toward the various alien technologies that now cluttered Marcus's workspace. "In 2 weeks, you've learned to interface human engineering with Kythera energy systems, Zephyrian probability mechanics, and Korthak structural design. Not because you studied for years to understand their principles, but because you approached each problem like it was just another repair job." Marcus began reassembling the transmission, his hands moving with the automatic precision of long practice. "You're saying the galaxy needs mechanics?" "I'm saying the galaxy needs fixers," Lyralii corrected. "People who look at something broken and can't rest until they figure out how to make it work better than it did before." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a new ship, this one unlike anything they had seen before. It was massive, easily the size of a city block, and its hull seemed to be made from crystallized starlight. When it landed in the field behind Marcus's house, it did so with such perfect grace that not a single stalk of wheat was disturbed. "The Eternal Archive," Lyralii breathed, rising from her chair with something approaching reverence. "I've never seen one of their ships before. They haven't participated in galactic politics for over 1,000 years. The beings that emerged from the archive ship were tall and graceful, their forms seeming to shift between solid matter and pure information. When they spoke, their words bypassed physical sound entirely. appearing directly in the mind as concepts rather than language. "We come seeking the guardian mechanic," their leader announced, its form stabilizing into something resembling a cross between an angel and a mathematical equation. "We bear knowledge that has been hidden since the First Galactic War." Marcus wiped his hands on a rag and approached the archive delegation. "I'm Marcus Chun. I guess I'm who you're looking for. You are the one who has demonstrated the Guardian's true purpose, the archive being confirmed. You have shown that protection comes not from maintaining what exists, but from healing what has been wounded. We have come to share the knowledge your species will need for what approaches." Around them, representatives from the other alien civilizations gathered, drawn by the unprecedented appearance of the archive ship. Even the normally aloof Zephyrians and the proud Korthak showed deference to these ancient keepers of galactic memory. The archive leader gestured, and images began forming in the air around them. Star charts showing the movement of vast fleets, tactical analyses of battles fought across impossible distances, and, at the center of it all, a darkness that seemed to consume light itself. "The entity you know as the Void Swarm is not what it appears," the archive being explained. "It is not a conquering force or a natural predator. It is a tool, created by a civilization that achieved perfect order eons ago." Marcus studied the tactical displays with the same methodical approach he used to diagnose engine problems. Someone built it. The architects, the archive being confirmed. They achieved such complete mastery over matter and energy that they transcended physical existence entirely. But transcendence came with a price. They lost the ability to grow, to change, to adapt. Their perfect order became a prison. The images shifted, showing worlds consumed by the swarm and transformed into something that hurt to look at directly. Perfect geometric structures that radiated wrongness, as if reality itself was being forced into unnatural configurations. "They created the swarm to solve their problem," Lyralii said, understanding dawning in her voice. "They're using it to digest other civilizations and extract the capacity for change." Correct, the archive being confirmed. Each consumed species adds their unique perspectives to the architect's collective consciousness, allowing them to experience growth and adaptation vicariously. They have been feeding on the galaxy's diversity for millennia, always careful to leave some civilizations intact to maintain the breeding population. Marcus felt a cold anger settling in his chest. "They're farming us, raising civilizations like livestock and harvesting them when they get too interesting. Until now," the archive being said, its form brightening with what might have been hope. "Humanity represents something the architects never anticipated. A species that embodies chaos not as destruction, but as creative force. You cannot be predicted, categorized, or consumed because you are always becoming something new." The tactical displays changed again, showing patterns of void swarm movement across the galaxy. What had seemed random was actually carefully orchestrated, designed to drive surviving civilizations toward greater specialization and efficiency, toward the kind of perfect order the architects could digest. "They're coming for Earth," Marcus realized. "Not because we're a threat, but because we're the ingredient they've been missing. If they can consume human adaptability, they will achieve the perfect synthesis of order and chaos," the archive being confirmed. "They will become truly unstoppable." Around them, the gathered alien representatives were absorbing this information with varying degrees of shock and horror. The hegemony's crystalline form was flickering with agitated colors. The Zephyrians had become barely visible, their probability clouds shifting through negative states. Even the Korthak warriors looked unsettled by the implications. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked. "The main architect fleet is 3 months distant," the archive being replied. "But they are already sending advanced forces to test human responses. The entity you destroyed was merely a probe, designed to measure your capabilities." Marcus looked around at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Each species represented millions of years of evolution, countless technological achievements, and the accumulated wisdom of ages. And all of them were looking to him, a small-town mechanic, for answers. "Then, we'd better get to work," he said simply. Lyralii moved to stand beside him, her hand finding his with the natural ease of someone who had chosen her place in the coming battle. "What do you need?" Marcus smiled, and there was something in that expression that made the assembled aliens step back involuntarily. It was the look of someone who had just figured out how to fix something that everyone else thought was irreparably broken. 6 weeks later, Marcus Chin's auto repair shop had become the command center for the most unlikely alliance in galactic history. The barn that once housed farming equipment now contained a fusion of human engineering and alien technology that defied every known law of physics. Workbenches held devices that combined Kithera energy matrices with Earth pneumatic tools. Holographic displays showing fleet positions floated above hydraulic lifts. The coffee pot had been modified with Zephyrian probability enhancers to brew the perfect cup every time. Marcus stood before a massive tactical display that showed the approaching architect fleet. 300 ships, each the size of a moon, moving through space with the inexorable patience of cosmic predators. Their formations were perfect, their trajectories calculated to optimal efficiency, their timing designed to maximize psychological impact on defending forces. "They'll arrive in 18 hours, reported Commander Sarah Mitchell, the U.S. Space Force officer who had been assigned as his military liaison. "Our combined fleet is ready. But, Marcus, I have to be honest with you. What we're planning has never been attempted before." Marcus nodded, his attention focused on the jury-rigged control system he had built from Earth computers and alien technology. Around him, the command center buzzed with activity as representatives from dozens of species coordinated the defense of Earth. Korthak warriors worked alongside human marines, their natural aggression channeled into strategic planning. Zephyrian probability matrices calculated tactical possibilities, while hegemony thought networks shared information instantaneously across the fleet. At the center of it all was Lyralii, her Kithera abilities enhanced by human intuition to coordinate systems that should never have been compatible. She had become something new, a bridge between order and chaos that allowed the Alliance to function despite their fundamental differences. "The beauty of this plan," Marcus said, making final adjustments to the control interface, "is that it's completely insane. The architects have spent millions of years perfecting their strategies against rational opponents. They've never faced an enemy stupid enough to try what we're about to do." The plan was indeed unprecedented. Instead of meeting the architect fleet in traditional battle, they were going to demonstrate something the perfect beings had never encountered: the human capacity to turn disaster into opportunity. "All stations report ready," Lyralii announced, her mental voice calm despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. "The Architect Advance Force has just entered the outer system." Through the display, Marcus watched as the enemy vessels materialized from hyperspace. They were beautiful in their terrible perfection, geometric forms that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could process. Each ship radiated an aura of inevitability, as if their victory was already written into the fabric of reality. The lead architect vessel began transmitting, its message arriving not as sound or electromagnetic radiation, but as pure concept impressed directly onto consciousness. Designation: Earth Civilization. You will submit to analysis and integration. Your chaotic patterns will be preserved and cataloged for optimal utilization. Resistance will result in incomplete harvesting and data loss. Marcus keyed the response system, a hybrid of human radio technology and Kithera thought transmission. "This is Marcus Chun, speaking for Earth and its allies. Here's our counteroffer. Go home, and we won't embarrass you in front of the entire galaxy." The pause that followed was precisely 1.7 seconds long, calculated to optimal psychological impact. "Your response indicates cognitive dysfunction. Clarification: resistance is futile. Submission is inevitable." "Yeah, well," Marcus said, his finger hovering over the activation switch. "That's what they all say." He triggered the system. What happened next would be studied by xenoarchaeologists for millennia. Instead of deploying weapons or raising shields, the Earth Defense Fleet did something no military force in galactic history had ever attempted. They began to malfunction. But these weren't random failures. Every breakdown, every system error, every catastrophic cascade failure had been carefully engineered by Marcus and his team. Human chaos, guided by alien precision, created patterns of destruction that looked completely accidental while serving strategic purposes. A Korthak battle cruiser's main engine exploded, sending the ship tumbling directly into the path of an architect vessel. The collision should have been easily avoided by any competent pilot, but the debris cloud created by the impact contained modified Zephyrian probability disruptors that made accurate navigation impossible within the affected area. A hegemony thought ship suffered a cascade failure in its neural networks, causing it to broadcast pure confusion across all psychic frequencies. The mental static blinded the architect fleet's coordination systems while simultaneously protecting allied ships from psychic attacks. Lyraliai's own vessel appeared to suffer a catastrophic reactor breach, creating a massive energy discharge that looked like a desperate last-ditch weapon. In reality, the explosion was carefully tuned to disrupt the quantum foundations that allowed architect ships to exist partially outside normal space. Each accident built upon the previous ones, creating an expanding zone of chaos that forced the perfect architect fleet to deal with increasingly unpredictable conditions. Their ships, designed for optimal performance in controlled environments, began experiencing problems they had never encountered. "It's working," Commander Mitchell reported, her voice tight with amazement. "Their formation integrity is breaking down. They're having to adapt to our failures, and adaptation isn't something they're designed for." Through the tactical display, Marcus watched as the architect fleet struggled with something they had never faced: pure, unmanageable randomness. Their ships collided with debris that shouldn't have been where it was. Their weapons missed targets that were moving in patterns no rational pilot would choose. Their perfect tactics fell apart when confronted with an enemy that seemed to be destroying itself faster than they could destroy it. But Marcus wasn't finished. As the architect fleet tried to restore order to the battlefield, he triggered the second phase of his plan. Every destroyed, allied ship suddenly reactivated, their apparent destruction revealed as elaborate theater. The Korthak cruiser's engine explosion had actually been a perfectly controlled dispersal of repair nanites that had spent the last few minutes infiltrating architect hull systems. The hegemony thought ship's cascade failure converted into a massive psychic assault that overwhelmed architect decision-making processes. Lyraliai's reactor breach became a precisely targeted EMP burst that disabled the enemy fleet's primary weapons. "Impossible," the architect fleet commander transmitted, its perfect composure cracking for the first time in eons. "Your vessels were destroyed. Sensors confirmed total system failures." "Human engineering tip," Marcus replied conversationally. "Sometimes the best way to fix something is to break it first. Gives you a chance to rebuild it better than it was." The architect fleet tried to retreat, but Marcus had anticipated that too. The random debris field created by their staged disasters had actually formed a carefully designed maze that channeled enemy ships toward predetermined locations. As the architects attempted to withdraw, they found their escape routes blocked by wreckage that moved with its own agenda. "The main fleet is entering the system," Lyraliai reported. 300 ships, just as the archive predicted. Marcus smiled and activated the final phase of his plan. Every piece of seemingly random debris, every disabled system, every chaotic element introduced into the battlefield suddenly revealed its true purpose. The entire outer system had become a massive trap designed to turn the architect's own perfection against them. The architect main fleet, arriving with flawless timing and optimal formations, found themselves flying directly into a three-dimensional maze of unpredictable hazards. Their perfect navigation systems couldn't account for obstacles that change position according to human intuition rather than physical laws. Their optimal tactics became liabilities when the battlefield refused to behave according to rational principles. For the first time in their million-year history, the architects faced an enemy that couldn't be predicted, analyzed, or integrated. Human chaos, enhanced by alien technology, and guided by the simple principle that every problem could be fixed with the right tools and enough stubborn determination. Query: how is this possible? The architect fleet commander transmitted, its thought patterns showing signs of something resembling confusion. Marcus leaned back in his chair and took a sip of perfect coffee. "It's possible," he said. Because you made one fundamental error. You assumed that chaos was the opposite of order. But chaos isn't the enemy of order. Chaos is what makes order possible in the first place. Around them, the Allied fleet moved with the fluid coordination of a team that had learned to work together despite their differences. Human adaptability guided alien precision. Korthak aggression was channeled through hegemony strategy. Zephyrian probability calculations were grounded by Earth pragmatism. They had become something new, something the architects couldn't categorize or consume. They were chaos and order working in harmony, proving that perfection came not from eliminating variables, but from learning to dance with them. The architect fleet, faced with an enemy that made no logical sense, did something they hadn't done in eons. They learned. And, in learning, they began to change. And, in changing, they discovered what they had lost in their pursuit of perfect order. The war ended not with destruction, but with transformation. The architects, encountering genuine chaos for the first time since their transcendence, remembered what it meant to grow. They withdrew not in defeat, but in gratitude, taking with them the knowledge that perfection was not a destination, but a journey. Marcus Chun, mechanic from Cedar Falls, Montana, had fixed the most complex machine in the galaxy, a civilization that had forgotten how to change. And, in doing so, he had given the universe a gift more precious than peace. He had given it hope. As the architect fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying news of humanity's gift to every corner of the galaxy, Marcus returned to his workbench. Mrs. Rodriguez's Honda still needed a new transmission, and some jobs were too important to put off, even for saving the universe. Lyralii approached, her luminous form more beautiful than ever in the aftermath of their impossible victory. "So what now?" she asked. Marcus picked up his wrench and smiled. "Now we get back to work. The galaxy's a big place, and there are a lot of things that need fixing. Outside, the stars shone with new possibility, and the universe hummed with the sound of broken things being made whole again. I need a bigger workshop," he said. "And every technical manual you people have. We're about to show the architects what happens when you threaten a mechanic's home." The real war was coming. But, for the first time in galactic history, chaos had a plan. Damage. Broken tools, shattered equipment, alien blood mixed with motor oil on the concrete floor. It would take weeks to get everything back to working order. "Think the insurance company will believe alien diplomatic incident as a claim?" he asked. Lyralii's laugh was like wind chimes in a summer breeze. "Marcus Chun," she said, "I think that's going to be the least of your problems." In the sky above, new lights were already appearing as word spread through the galactic community. Humanity had announced its presence in the most dramatic way possible, and the universe was taking notice. Marcus poured himself another cup of coffee and settled in to watch the show. After all, someone had to keep an eye on things while the galaxy figured out what to do with its newest member species. ND severed the central load-bearing structure that held its form together. It collapsed inward like a house of cards made from nightmares. The remaining smaller creatures fled back to their ship and launched into space, carrying news of their defeat back to whatever dark intelligence commanded the swarm. Marcus stood in the wreckage of his garage, covered in alien ichor, and feeling more alive than he had in years. Lyralii approached slowly, her wounds already beginning to heal now that the swarm's psychic interference had been removed. "They will return," she said softly. "With more ships, heavier weapons, different strategies." "Let them come," Marcus replied, surprised by the confidence in his own voice. "They just learned something important about humans." "What's that?" Marcus looked up at the stars where more lights were already appearing as other alien civilizations detected the disturbance. Some would be allies, drawn by news that the Kythera Guardian had survived. Others would be enemies, seeking to finish what the swarm had started. "They learned," Marcus said, cleaning alien blood off his wrench, "that humans don't just adapt to survive. We adapt to win." The real war was just beginning. But, for the first time in eons, the galaxy's immune system was about to wake up. "No," Marcus said, loading the rifle with hands that didn't shake despite everything. He was a mechanic. Like me. The first ship landed in his front yard with a sound like breaking glass. Through the window, Marcus could see shapes moving in the darkness. They were wrong in ways that his mind refused to process completely, as if someone had tried to design predators without understanding what life actually was. Lyraliai's hand found his, and strength flowed between them through the touch. Then, perhaps, she said softly, our records were incomplete after all. The garage door began to buckle under some invisible force, metal groaning in protest. Marcus raised his rifle and realized that everything in his quiet, simple life had been leading to this moment. He didn't know how to save the galaxy, didn't understand the cosmic forces at play, but he knew how to protect someone who needed help. Stay behind me, he told the last guardian of a dying civilization. And get ready to see what a human mechanic can do when someone threatens what he cares about. The door exploded inward, and the real war began.